if you're feeling super stressed out and really have the sensation of an unhappiness, there's one thing. If you shift that one thing, it can change your life around big time. And it's comparing yourself. And we all do. We all compare ourselves. There's actually reasons because this is how our brain functions. We're going to cover that in this episode, as well as actually pros and cons of comparison. There's also benefits for it, but it's also has a lot of negative side effects. And we're going to cover those as well as some fantastic strategies on how to do less of it. So stopping isn't really the right thing to say because we need to compare ourselves for good reason as well. Welcome. I'm Heike Fallon. I'm a personal high performance coach, and I help my clients really with their self-leadership and to live a healthier, sustainable lifestyle so they can be happier and healthier and lead other people better.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Shannon Passalacqua, and I too am a high performance coach, and I help women heal after miscarriage. And I think there's a lot of self-comparison in
Oh,
the grief
100%.
world.
Let's really be really clear. We all compare ourselves. Oftentimes we
Yeah.
don't even realize we're not aware of it. And sometimes we're very aware of it.
Hmm.
The key is to first understand, I think, that it is part of our survival system, right? First off, we have the humans need to be in a group. They need to be in community. That is a huge part of who we are. And to be able to be part of a group, you automatically compare
Hmm.
just to kind of build alliances, to be connecting with others. So oftentimes
This
when
is, yeah,
we
that's
compare,
exactly what I was going to say. Belonging and community.
belonging, and it creates a connection. So be that comparing ourselves, that is one part. The other component is that we do have certain values. We all have our own values and our strengths and challenges. And
Mhm.
what do we measure it on? We need something that we
Right.
that guides us, right? There's nothing, there's no playbook of this is how
Hmm.
it should be. But so when if I'm trying to be part of something, I need to compare somewhere where other things are just to kind of know where my
Right. And I think
strength,
that's,
where am I with my strength? There's no reference
yeah,
points.
that's the positive. I think that's I think when we use the word comparison, it can come off as a negative connotation, right? Like
Yeah.
it can sound like a negative word. However, when you're doing it in that way that you just described, it's more of a positive phrasing, right? We're comparing ourselves in a way to make connections, um, and build community. And that's a really good way for how comparison can work to our advantage.
And we need,
Um,
right, from a
yeah, when we're
survival
looking at
standpoint.
our values
Yeah.
and how we can come together and support each other, that is a great way where comparison works out.
And that's
It's when it goes the other way that we'll
when
get
it
into
goes the other
later.
way. We're going to cover that in a
Hmm.
second, but just to also be clear that there's two ways we can compare. It can be, it's called the upward comparison. So when we compare ourselves with others that have more than we have
Yeah,
or are better off than we are, like that's our perception.
our interpretation of that.
Our
Hmm.
interpretation, or a downward comparison where we feel superior. We say, well, I got that figured out. They haven't. And that's neither one of them
Hmm.
is better or worse. Both can create actually unhappiness. There's research done on that. But the key is that the brains are wired to compare. We need that reference point.
Well,
So
it goes back to that where our brains are protecting ourselves,
yes,
right? Our brains are
absolutely.
always working to protect ourselves. And we
Absolutely.
have to be able to analyze the situation and look at different people and situations and figure out how it's going to keep us safe. And if
Correct.
it's going to create danger in our lives, then we need to somehow come up with terms how to, how that works in our brain. So, and I'm
And
sure you can say that in a much more elegant way.
no, not
More
necessarily.
scientific.
Not necessarily, but another big component is in here too, and that often we've talked about it. There's chemical releases are happening. So when we're comparing ourselves, and particularly again, either direction doesn't matter right now, but there can be if it makes us feel better, it's the dopamine release,
Dopamine.
right? And
So, okay, I have a question.
yeah,
Is there's a dopamine release when you are when you think you're better than someone else?
yeah, because that exactly because you go like, I got this figured out. I'm so good.
That seems so counterintuitive. Like now you think you're better. I mean, it makes sense, but like, okay,
Well, I
I feel
feel
like
good
I'm better
about
than someone. Yeah.
I feel good about myself. Rather the other way around, actually, that side is actually, I do believe. Now I can't back this up right now with a specific research study, but as far as the releases, but technically when you down compare, meaning you feeling like you figured it out, you're better off, there is more the positive dopamine release, right?
I
And
mean, it makes
other
sense. I
way
just
around,
know.
the other way around, if you comparing with, oh, somebody else has more, is better at, then it's
Mhm.
more actually a fear, or we
Yeah,
immediately go into, I lack of
anxiety.
something, and that can impact our self-esteem, and also the fear, like the FOMO, right, is the best one.
Yeah,
Like, oh my
yeah.
God, they're already doing this and I'm not. So now I'm getting into the fight and flight mode, which is more cortisol release, which is more a stress hormone and
Mhm.
can really contribute to anxiety and depression as well. So,
That's I think that's so interesting because like if I find myself, because we all do it, if when I find myself, if I'm on social media or whatever, and I'm like, oh, so and so doesn't know how to do that or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I've done that. I check myself because I'm like, well, that doesn't mean they're less than me.
yeah.
It just means that they haven't, whatever it is. Um, but it's interesting, and I can see the opposite direction as well because we see it with our children on social media. I see it with myself. We see it like even just if you're on social media and you see so and so, one of your friends went out to dinner with another friend and you weren't invited, suddenly
Yeah.
you're like, well, why wasn't I invited? Am I
Yeah.
not good enough? Are they excluding me? Da, da, da. And you've just got this like
Yeah, it shows up really quickly. All of us, there's no there's no immunity because we
it's so
are
funny, weird.
wired to feel part of something. We're wired of like I said in survival mode, figuring it out. So here's the challenging part. It's an emotional response. And at the same time, right, we can, from a cognitive standpoint, like that self-awareness, we can practice, but oftentimes that emotional can be
Yeah.
totally overtaking, right? So
Well, I
we,
think there's a reason to it because we all want to be in a community. Our survival skills are based on being in a community.
yep.
So when we feel like we're left out of something, then we're not part of that community, then suddenly we go into that survival mode. Like we're left out of a community and now like how are we going to survive? And that I think is just ingrained in us
And then
because
try
we've
to think straight.
exactly like try to get your brain to rationalize that and be like, okay, maybe this is why we shouldn't be on social media as much.
Well, that is a problem. And there are researches done, particularly that it creates so much more anxiety, depression because of this constant social media is like the epic center of comparison. And
Yeah.
and this means again, upward, downward, it doesn't matter. It's constantly seeing what other people are doing. Like I'm not invited. Oh my God, they went on this trip. Oh, look at that guy crashed. All
Right.
these videos of like people getting hurt or injured or doing stupid stuff, right? It 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 is literally a heaven for comparison. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to, if you, and so I'm going to give you already one strategy is, yeah, stop that social media. That is one big strategy. You should eliminate or limit
limit. Yeah.
depending on where you stand on social media. That's definitely one strategy. But let's talk force benefit, because I think it's also important to understand it's not just negative. So it can create unhappiness, it can create more stress, it can create anxiety, depression, low
Cortisol
self-esteem.
spikes.
It really can spiral really far down, where also people don't do anything anymore and they just procrastinate because they just feel miserable about
Yeah,
themselves.
they're just in a rut,
But in
stuck.
moderation, as we talked just earlier, right, it can be really motivating too, right? If it
Hmm.
can be, um when I'm comparing myself with everyone, I'm like, oh man, I can do this, and I can reach this, and I can work on that. So comparing
It
yourself can be
it can be
motivating.
inspirational.
It can be
You see someone
inspirational.
doing something, you're like, oh, if that person can do it, I can do it. It can
Mhm.
inspire creativity. If you see someone doing some sort of, like if they're singing or dancing or whatever, it can inspire that in yourself. It's just, I think it's learning how to fine tune it.
Yeah, and then again, connection is so important. And when we
Mhm.
share the struggles, for example, with somebody else, we do compare when we do that. And but that can also create a connection when we do that, when we're seeing like, hey, you're struggling, I'm struggling, and we're you still comparing, right?
Yeah. So I have it. My 2 cents on this is, when I was going through my miscarriages, and I always wanted to be able to talk to someone who had been through a similar experience,
Yeah.
which is why I created my group, Miscarriage Warriors, because I know women want to come together.
Yeah.
And it's always like, why do we do that? There is that quote, like, misery loves company. But it's true. It's funny because it's true, but it's true because we want to be validated
Yeah.
in what we are going through, and we want to know that we're not alone in that situation. We want to know that there are other people experiencing similar, you know emotions and life experiences, and we can bounce ideas off each other. Like, the same thing. I've seen the same thing happen as I'm going through perimenopause, and my friends are going through it at the same time. And some
So
people
you
are not
compare.
experiencing. Yeah,
So you
we are
compare. We
comparing.
are comparing in a healthy
Yeah,
way,
in a
because
healthy way. Like,
we're
some of us are
sharing.
not having any
Yeah,
symptoms. And I could say, oh my God, I'm so jealous of you.
yeah,
And I could downward spiral on that, but I'm not.
yeah.
But I do have friends who, we have similar experiences. You and I have similar experiences in this, and we bond. Was that trauma bonding?
Well, we bond. No, it doesn't matter what we label it, right? That's why communities are so important, so we can share in a safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
We feel seen and validated.
feel seen and validated, and we can compare in a healthy way. And again, also it depends on though how our perspective is to
Yeah.
utilize it. I'm not saying like that in a community you might not do a comparison that's too much and unhealthy. We'll talk a couple of stories in a second, but what I wanted to say too is that the comparison happens to for our brain to figure out, where am I and
Mm-hmm.
where am I standing? And do I need to take action? Do I need to maybe
Mm.
do something more? Like you said, somebody not having any problems and somebody else maybe having similar problems. You're going like, so should I
How are you solving this problem?
is this like typical, or how are they solving problems? Should I take action? Should I do something about it? Should I just
Yeah.
wait it out? So it gives us also starting point, right? To
Mm-hmm.
know like, what should I do? Where should I go? What should I, maybe learn more about, or so it can help
Yeah,
our personal growth as well.
I love that. Can I share something that I see a lot, that I see a lot of people do this in the grief world,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's pretty typical. Is I call it grief comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when, and I'll share how I see it in my community in
Yeah.
miscarriages. Is when a woman can come to me and say, like, oh, I'm really sad. I had a miscarriage at 5, 6 weeks or whatever. And then she'll dismiss it and say, but so and so had a miscarriage when she was at 12 weeks or 20 weeks. And so that's harder than what I went through. And so you're comparing your own grief with someone else's grief, or I shouldn't be feeling this way because there are other people experiencing harder things. Like, the people who are going through all the hurricanes, I shouldn't be upset about what I'm going through because they're, you know, going through such hard times. Grief comparison is a very interesting concept and something that I see a lot. And I want people to know that you can't compare your grief. A
Yeah.
loss is a loss, and whatever you're feeling is what you're feeling. And
It's
it's
this
okay
thing.
to be sad still.
I'm saying always, it's this, the brain doesn't
The brain
know.
doesn't know that someone else's
It's
pain is
not
like
like there's more in the
or
moment,
less.
more
Mhm.
release of chemicals or less depending on severity. It's more like how your emotions and you feel it. It can be from an outside perspective, one being lesser traumatic. It's still for you traumatic. It's
Right,
still a 10 out of 10. And for the other person, a 10 out of 10 in their
right.
perspective. So,
Yeah. I mean, I had my miscarriages. I have a really good friend who had a miscarriage. It didn't affect her at all. And we talk about that and how interesting it is how people handle that situation. But like I find that interesting about how people compare their grief and they dismiss their own emotions based
yeah,
off of that comparison. And I don't want people to dismiss what they're feeling. What you're feeling is very valid. And if
absolutely.
you need community for it, find yourself a community for it. That's where comparison can come in a good way.
And with that said, the or the self comparison really helps with the self awareness to know where we stand, where our strengths are, how we're feeling. But again, it's also important to learn that self awareness and how we interpret that self
Mm,
awareness and what we do with it. So, big part is recognizing, right? Am I comparing myself? Because we all do constantly. And again, sometimes very obvious, but there's sometimes the settled one, like pay attention to it next time you scroll and you see some beautiful, trip
mom.
somewhere
Yeah.
people have done, and you go like, oh, I wish I would be there. I could do a trip like that. That is right there comparing yourself. Um,
I'm gonna be brutally honest. I've been doing this myself
oh yeah,
with
we all do.
because menopause has hit my body so hard. And here I am comparing myself how I look compared to other women.
Oh, totally.
And it's like it really can really be a downer.
Well, that's the thing. So key is, I think, self-assessment and then practicing self-compassion.
Yeah. Noticing it. Here's a
Be kind
message.
to yourself.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness, 100%. Gratitude is another very important strategy, I think. And
Well,
really,
can we talk about gratitude a little
yes,
bit?
yes,
Because I think that when we are focusing more on what we're grateful for, and if we're starting our days and hopefully ending our days finding gratitude, we're not going to be focusing so much on comparison. Because
yep.
when we are focused on the positive, and I'm not saying like, everything has to be positive. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when we're focusing on gratitude, we're focusing less on comparison.
Yeah, we're focusing more on ourself, our intrinsic motivation and intrinsic feelings rather than comparison with somebody else's usually extrinsic. Oops.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And,
Like
and
they're,
we need to really be aware of we can't constantly have extrinsic. We need to absolutely come from within. And gratitude practice is super important there. I do want to say also one thing for gratitude practice. It's not just about, oh, I'm grateful for my family. It's really about taking
as
a moment,
well.
connecting it to your emotions, to your feelings. How does your family member make you feel? What is the positive feeling that you have when you think of them, or a moment that you experience with somebody together? How do you feel in that moment? And connecting it to emotions has
Mhm.
shown to be a much higher impact on our brain than just checklist.
Yeah, when they've done studies on it, it's more of not just making a list and okay, that's what I'm grateful for and move on with your day. It's more like if you're going to make a list, connect with everything that you're writing. Let's say you are going to write three things and connect with that, the first thing that you're writing about, and write about it. Don't, and like feel that emotion. That's actually what makes the changes in your brain.
Yep.
So
100.
don't just, I mean, I think we can very easily just start our morning and be like, okay, this is my to-do list. I'm going to write five things that I'm grateful for. And then you just move on. But if you're not connecting with it, it's not going to be helpful.
No, no, definitely you're not utilizing it to the fullest potential. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
one other thing too is I think very important of knowing your values and knowing what
Yeah.
your goals are and reminding yourself of what is your intention? What is your goal? And how's that aligning with my values? And, reminding yourself sometimes when certain comparison shows up, like, is that really aligning with who I
Who
am
I am and who I want to be.
and who I want to be and my values? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something you need to first obviously identify your values and be more clear about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the awareness, figure out how to remind yourself and just in the moment really go like, am I
Yeah.
am I lining up here or not? Or not,
Yeah.
right? Like what's important to me, really?
Yeah. I like that
I
one.
also think this is one that I struggled the most with long time. Like when not until like what, 6, 7 years ago that I started really doing that is celebrating or acknowledging myself for small win tasks.
I'm the worst at that. I am the
I
worst.
I totally sucked at that. Like I just take it for granted that I got all these things done. And at first, I have to be honest, like celebrate myself. What are you talking about? Yeah, I celebrate my birthdays all the time, but like,
I love celebrating birthday.
but but actually, and if celebration doesn't work the word for somebody, I usually say like acknowledge yourself for accomplishing something.
Right. Because and we've talked about this in the past, but I think it's important to make that um I just want to make it clear that when we say celebrate, it doesn't mean like, hey, we're going to go open a bottle of champagne and we're going to go have a really nice meal every time we do something. Like it's celebrate is, I think acknowledgement, that word works better for me
Yeah.
because when I think of celebrating, I'm like, okay, we're going to have a party every time I do something like, and that's not going to happen. Like if I, you know, get something done that was on my checklist that has been on my checklist for a long time and I get it done, I need to learn how to acknowledge myself and say, hey, I did that. Good job. Yeah. But it doesn't mean I have
Or
to
a
go
little
pour myself a
self-help.
glass of champagne.
Or a little hard. Do we get a little hard
Right.
going
Like,
here?
and maybe just even journal or write about it. Like, hey, I did this. Good job for me. And I think we live in a society where we're not supposed to say good job to ourselves. We're just supposed to blow it off and move
We're
on.
supposed to
And
keep going, going, and
what's our next
get done,
goal?
get done the big projects or big
Yeah.
things, or why are you not getting blah 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 figured out? It's
But it
really
goes back to that dopamine hit, right? Like we need those intermittent dopamine hits, and that's going to keep us going more. And so if we give ourselves that dopamine hit, we can give it to
it,
ourselves.
it
It's going to
changed
keep us going.
my life 100%. I definitely made it practice, and it's been totally changing on how we feel about ourselves, and that internal emotion shifts
Are
100%.
you
Not
willing to
overnight.
share your practice?
Oh,
Like, what do you do?
yeah. So one is I changed my to-do list and the things that I need to get done. Like literally going into what are my number one thing I'm working on, and instead of having like here's my to-do list of 10 things, I have the 3 things that I want to get done. And at the end of the day, if I get those 3 things done, great. And anything extra is bonus. And it was in a way that is absolutely attainable. But it can
But
also
how do
be,
you celebrate yourself? How do you acknowledge yourself?
oh,
What do
I
you?
just write it. I write in the evening. I journal. In the
Get a journal.
get a journal. I write it down most evenings, and if I don't, I've actually now started to over time really being more mindful along the way, like during the day, to go like, okay, I got that done, and I may cross it. That just that moment of crossing out that instead of just crossing out, checking off, actually going cross out the task you done and go like, okay, awesome. I got that done in and just a split second longer to go like, you know what? Dang, got one done. Just
Yeah.
spending that extra second there.
Okay.
That's what I do. So it's become more part of ongoing throughout the day
Okay.
and reflecting otherwise on other things.
So it's
So
become a habit.
it's become really more a habit. Yep. And so it definitely changed because I'm not as hard on myself anymore. And I also don't compare myself as much. Or if I do compare, I can go, you know what? No, no. And this is another thing is I'm on my path. Okay. I can't
Mm,
compare myself. I got my life with my roles that I'm fulfilling.
my
And
struggles.
there's nobody else like that in the
Yeah.
same situation as I am. Nobody.
Yeah.
It's my path. And so that mindset helps with then going, you know what? I got this done. I kept that momentum going where my goal is and what I want to accomplish. And it doesn't matter how big or small my little accomplishments are. I literally go, okay, I got that done. That was on my path for this goal. And I keep moving it forward and thinking more about my path and where I'm at and
Mhm.
focusing on that and like celebrating or acknowledging my accomplishments along my path.
Yeah. I
Not,
think that's really important to remember is everyone has their own path and everyone is dealing with their own things, good and bad.
well, yeah,
Like it's very easy to look at someone who, lives in the same town and has, goes to the same school or whatever, has, and to compare yourself and say, well, how come I haven't done that and that person has? But you don't know what's going on.
no,
You don't know what's going on in their lives. You don't know if they're sick. You don't know if they're, healthy. You don't know what's going on in their lives. And so I think that's so powerful and so important to remember you are unique and you have your own path and you have to just, it's your own journey. It's not going to look the same as everyone else's.
it
And
won't.
honestly, do you want it to?
No.
Like, it's funny because I mean, I do compare myself to other people and then I'm like, but I don't want to be that person.
Yep.
Like, that's not what I want. And so that goes back to values too. Like, if you need to understand your values, I don't want to be that person. I want to be me. I'm
Yep.
weird and crazy. And I like the fact that I'm not going to do things the same way as everyone else.
Exactly. And so right there, I think reminding ourselves that we're unique. It's
Mhm.
who we are. As long as we keep moving forward and we acknowledge our accomplishments along the way,
Mhm.
getting those little dopamine hits that helps us to stay motivated, but also to keep us really in a more healthier and happier place, I think is
Yeah,
extremely important. So
I love that.
we
That's
can't
good.
so it's not stop comparing yourself because we're not stopping. We need it,
No, we
but we
need it.
need it in moderations. And we need to really apply strategies to manage that very well so that we can live healthier and happier, less stressed, and reach
Less
our goals.
anxious.
Less anxious. That's right. And it's a journey, it's a process. So
Yeah.
hopefully, all these strategies were super helpful. Lots of insights on this topic. I always find it super fascinating because we're all in it. We're all in
Yep.
this
We're all
journey.
doing it.
We're all doing it.
This
And
journey we call life.
the journey we call life. That's right. It's exciting though. Even though it's
Yeah.
hard at times, it's exciting. So, well, thank you. And thank
Thank
you
you.
for everybody listening. And remember,
See you next time.
it's your journey, and we see you next time.
Bye.